Grit your teeth, clench your teeth, and squeeze your cheeks as tight as you can, because I'm about to utter a word that brings out the most obnoxious individuals in every fan base ever. Power scaling. And if you think I'm exaggerating on that, whoa boy, you must not have been on the internet for very long. Which, you know what? Good for you. Anyways, power scaling's more or less the #1 pastime for die-hard fans of pretty much any series that involves fighting. Add superpowers into the mix, and it just gets worse, with people pitting all kinds of niche characters against even more niche versions of other characters from some comic only your grandpa knows about from the 60s. No, I do not care if some AU Superman from a random one-shot has a kryptonite that turns him gay. He still beats Batman, and I'll die on that hill. And speaking of Superman, one of the most divisive power scaling matchups of the current day is basically just between his evil copies. I am, of course, talking about Homelander and Omni-Man. One of them's basically a very close copy of Kal-El, claiming that he was sent from his much more advanced planet to do good on Earth. At least until he reveals that his version of Krypton's more like the Science than anything else, and that they only visit planets to conquer them. On the other hand, we've got the guy who also claims to be a one-to-one copy of the Man of Steel, sent to Earth as a baby to make the planet a better place. Except he's actually a human lab baby that probably shouldn't ever meet Iron Man for the sake of his super fragile ego.
You're a laboratory experiment, Rogers. Everything special about you came out of a bottle.
Now look, I'm no expert when it comes to being a superhuman capable of using a human skull like a stress ball, or even when it comes to smashing someone's eardrums in with a clap of my hands. But even still, I feel pretty confident in saying one of these characters bends the other over their knee and spanks some discipline into them with ease. Like, there is no reason this even needs to be a debate. And between the planet-conquering warrior and the attention-seeking Superman child, I'll let you guess which one does what in that scenario. Of course, don't just take my word for it. After all, just saying I'm right and you're wrong isn't exactly the best way to approach having a conversation about, well, anything. So, in order to properly conclude which of these two menaces wins in the deathmatch, let's go ahead and review each of their feats objectively, starting with strength. So, what exactly have we seen Homelander do? He can casually tap a door clean off its hinges, punch clean through someone's guts, snap another soup's neck, pull off someone's jaw, and bend metal with his bare hands. So basically, he treats human bodies like wet tissues, easily torn, ripped, and pulled apart. However, even more impressive is when he managed to blow the emergency exit off a plane mid-air, completely ignoring the extreme air pressure bearing down on him. There's plenty of other moments that serve as examples of that raw strength too, like when he tosses a baseball from New York that Stillwell claims will land all the way to Boston. But frankly, that emergency exit on the plane is more impressive than most of them, considering the air pressure pushing back is worth tens of thousands of pounds of force. Of course, there's also his fights with other supes like Soldier Boy, Butcher on Temp V, Maeve, and more. But I'd have to dive a lot deeper to scale him against all of them just to explain his strength. So let's just say the dude's really strong by human standards, based off of all of these scenes. Well, and that one scene in the comics where he busts a nut at the speed of sound, but I think we're better off not touching that with a 10-foot pole. In addition to all of this, Homelander actually has a couple of powers that his opponent today doesn't, namely heat vision and the sonic scream. But those won't do him much good, and we'll get to why in just a bit. In contrast to Homelander's feats, Omni-Man's are, to put it as mildly as possible, not even on the same planet, let alone the same ballpark. Literally, Homelander rips through people's flesh? Well, Omni-Man turned an entire planet into a lifeless wasteland with just one high-speed, indestructible projectile. And that projectile was him. He flew through the whole planet and destroyed everything on it just by doing that. Remember what I said about Homelander throwing a baseball across states? Well, Omni-Man might as well be flipping him the bird personally, because he does the exact same thing across the whole planet just to play catch with his son. And then there's a simple fact of just how brutal he is in battle. From the very first episode of the show, we've watched Omni-Man punch through people, swipe their torsos off, squeeze their heads like grapes, and snap their necks. So, you know, everything Homelander does, but even more efficiently. And this is all before we even get to Omni-Man's more insane feats, other than destroying the Flaxen homeworld. Things like how he used Mark as a washcloth to wipe the life off of the face of a whole city, how he fought and beat an honest-to-God kaiju, and his fights against Throg. By this point though, I doubt I really need to go into more examples. Instead, let's pull up some good old reliable math. Homelander, based on his feats in the comic, can be scaled as capable of lifting around 450 to 500 tons. That's pretty impressive, right? Well, yeah, but Omni-Man can do this. Yeah, I know. I said we do math, but screw that. I'm not calculating the weight of a freaking island's worth of land. Point is, dude could legitimately ask Homelander if he even lifts, and it would be valid considering how massive the gap between them is. With strength out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at just how tough each of these characters are. How much punishment can they take before they break, and which of them would be able to take it for longer. However, for the sake of keeping this short and to the point, I'm not going to go through each and every time Homelander's tanked a bullet or a punch or something. Instead, all we need to watch is Stillwell saying this.
He doesn't have any weakness. There isn't a weapon on Earth that they haven't thrown at him. They've all failed.
Of course, the key words of that statement are on Earth. So yes, no bullets, bombs, or traps would be able to hurt him. But this is also the same guy who was kind of getting bodied by Butcher and Soldier Boy when they teamed up against him. And those dudes are just ordinary superhumans. Well, as ordinary as superhuman hell-bent on killing you can be at least. Point being, Homelander's tough enough to survive any man-made weapon on a relatively normal version of Earth. But pit him against someone else who's got super strength too, and the playing field's a lot more even. Which brings us to Omni-Man, who tanked things that would absolutely ruin Homelander, or at the very least, hurt him a hell of a lot more than they did Omni-Man. Case in point, Cecil's freaking space laser, which has more raw power than any weapon in the universe of the boys. Omni-Man just shrugs that thing off like it's a love tap from Debbie and keeps pushing, which is really all we need to see. Homelander ain't walking away from that thing without some serious damage. But that's not all, because there's also instances of Omni-Man withstanding genuine heat vision in the comics. You know, basically the only power Homelander can brag about having over Omni-Man? Yeah, nullified. There is simply no way Homelander's laser eyes are hot enough to hurt Omni-Man in any meaningful way. There's plenty of other examples to be brought up as well, but honestly, I'd say we've got all we need as far as comparing these two goes. Finally, it's time to consider the more mental aspect of any fight between these two. How well would they fight? Which of them would be more efficient? And how much skill do they have? To that I say, how's that even a question? Do we really need to discuss this? Homelander's a big fish in a tiny pond who's never had to actually struggle or train. Under that inflated muscle suit he never takes off, he doesn't really have much going for him. There's no real technique, no experience in genuine combat, and no need for battle IQ since, well, he hasn't fought anyone that'd warrant it. In comparison, Nolan is literally thousands of years old, with most of those years spent honing his skills, training his body, and mastering his mind. Growing up and surviving in the Viltrum Empire means you have to be strong, and you have to get strong fast. Unlike Homelander, Omni-Man was surrounded by peers on equal footing with him since birth. That means he doesn't just know how to dismantle those weaker than him, he also knows how to use his head to take down equals. Not that Homelander really classifies as that. In any case, to summarize all of that, Omni-Man's a ruthless warrior who's trained as a precise, efficient, and highly powerful weapon that gets the job done. And Homelander's a dude starved for attention whose priority in a fight is looking good for the cameras. I'll be completely honest with you guys, this is not close. Like, not even remotely. In fact, I'm gonna paint you a picture real quick for just how this fight would go. Omni-Man and Homelander face off. Omni-Man sizes Homie up. He wonders what this dude's deal is, but he's unbothered. In response, Homelander throws a hissy fit over being treated like an NPC and starts tweaking like he tends to when he's mad. He rushes at Omni-Man and throws a handful of attacks, only for Omni-Man to literally not give a single F. Cue the heat vision from Homelander along with some loud and obnoxious whining to boot. As the smoke clears, surprise, surprise, all Omni-Man got out of that was a tan bordering on light sunburn. If he's annoyed enough by this point to finish things quickly, quite literally all he needs to do is throw a jab at Homelander with a decent chunk of his full strength, and the discount Superman's head goes flying off his body, at least if he doesn't decide to toy with him first. But like we discussed earlier, Omni-Man's a warrior first, which means he's just trying to beat his enemy as quickly and effectively as possible. And yeah, that's kind of it. Look, I don't know what y'all were expecting here. I tried to stretch that fight scene out a little more for fun, but I've made it pretty clear throughout this video who my bets are on. Quite frankly, this whole matchup is the perfect representation of that hydrogen bomb versus coughing baby meme. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell to be notified of any latest uploads. That said, see you in the next one.